How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel and what is most likely the start of your 2022 fantasy football playoff schedule here. From this point going forward, it is essentially make or break, do or die lineup decision making for our fantasy team. So hopefully if you're in just one league here, you made your playoffs for this season. Of course, if you're watching today's video, you most likely did, unless you just really love fantasy football. Otherwise, if you're in a variety of leagues, hopefully the majority of them made the postseason and we can make that push for those league championships. But in today's episode, I'll be breaking down 5 players, 5 lineup options at the wide receiver position that I think have the potential to be very strong starts this week. We'll talk through some potential guys I think have week winning value, and we'll break down all that stuff, the matchups, and more in today's episode. So, as always, if you're somehow watching this video for the first time or watching the channel for the first time this season, head on down and click that subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me here, and we're here to help you guys win your league championships this season. So support us while we support you, and let's dive into today's episode. All right, here we go. So before I dive into Brandon Aiyuk and our starters for this week, let's quickly recap my week 14 picks here. I just do this for transparency and to show you guys our results from the past game. So if you missed the running backs episode, we went 5-7 in week 14. Pretty good there. You can check out those picks in our separate episode live on the channel right now. For the receivers, we went 4-6, so 66% for this past week. We hit the ball out of the park with Jerry Jeudy without Courtland Sutton. He had his first career hat trick. That was absolutely beautiful. We narrowly made it on Garrett Wilson, who scored over double digits after some late receptions in that Buffalo contest. We were correct on sitting Gabe Davis, who once again stunk it up in a tough Jets matchup. We also hit on Deontay Johnson. Surprisingly, even though Kenny Pickett left the game, I absolutely hate Mitchell Trubisky. I just do not trust that man to deliver success. The job was done, double digits for Deontay. He had himself a really nice floor game as projected. Our bad miss of the week was DJ Moore, who apparently sustained an injury in this game. However, he had himself a very, very minimal level of involvement in this football game. And then Brandon Aiyuk, actually, it was kind of circumstantial, very interesting here. But he had 2 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown is what did me in, crossing him through the double-digit threshold, which for our sits, we look to, obviously have guys that go below double digits. So for Aiyuk, that touchdown got it. But, of course, Debo got hurt in the middle of that game. And I believe the touchdown happened afterwards. So whether or not it's irrelevant here, because that is going to spin us right into today's take here for Brandon Aiyuk playing on Thursday Night Football. No Debo Samuel. It's an ankle sprain and an MCL sprain, I want to say. I forget exactly what the specifics were. I can try and pull that up here on my phone on Twitter as I talk through Brandon Aiyuk. But it'll probably just be painful for you guys to listen while I multitask. So just assume that it's or you go check for yourself, the better. I don't want to falsely report the information here, but it is expected Debo will return at some point during the regular season. For Brandon Aiyuk, though, in week 15, doesn't matter. He is going to be the clear alpha wide receiver in this offense for this week. He should hopefully chart a little bit more into some of that underneath route usage, and they showed they're not afraid to let the ball rip downfield with Brock Purdy either. So he's going to see an increased level of dependence from his offensive players, playmakers. Obviously, he's dependent on Brock Purdy and the play calling to get him the football, but for Aiyuk here, I am expecting an increased workload again. He only had 3 targets for 57 yards, 2 receptions this past week, but that all should go up. It was also a blowout win against Tampa Bay, which of course decreases the need for passing late in that contest. So the Seattle team right now that they're facing on Thursday Night Football, they're kind of reeling right now, especially on defense. They can't stop the run. So if San Francisco gets that portion of their offense moving, their play action game is going to be lethal. And then you take into consideration here the fact that right now Seattle offensively is kind of handicapped. They haven't been able to run the football whatsoever in the absence of Ken Walker, and especially with Rashad Penny out for the season as well. They haven't had an answer, and it wasn't Travis Homer, it wasn't Tony Jones Jr. this past week. The San Francisco defense is a completely nasty, just terrible sight to see for an undermanned offense on the opposing sideline. So essentially, my expectation here is a complete and utter dominance by San Francisco, a large margin of discrepancy between time of possession for San Fran, obviously controlling the clock, and then Seattle struggling. I think that this could be a fairly one-sided affair here. It is a divisional game now, so we'll see how things play out here. I am very confident and bullish in Aiyuk as a top 24 play this week, though. Chris Olave taking on the Atlanta Falcons, one of the more bullish matchups of the season here. Atlanta actually got pretty solid against the pass last season. A.J. Terrell was playing much better football. Now he has regressed back to kind of rookie season A.J. Terrell, and he's been stinking it up here as of late. That is very good news. Excuse me, I was going to say bad news. Very good news for Chris Olave here, who the first time in week 1 when these teams squared off, Chris Olave caught all 3 of his targets for 41 yards and 7.6 fantasy points. However, the keynote here is that this was pre-breakout for Chris Olave. What do I mean by that? Essentially here, Chris Olave had not, as a rookie in this offense, established himself for this football team as a weekly contributor to the lineup, and B, the rapport that he had with Jameis Winston was probably limited at this time. Now, in this matchup, Michael Thomas also dominated. We saw players having success for the Saints passing game in this matchup. So for Chris Olave here, I'm expecting him to have a strong showing. He is now the clear alpha receiver 1 for the Saints team. I do think that the Saints, off of a bye week, should hopefully be a little bit more buttoned up here. Hopefully they have a good offensive game plan going into this game. And ultimately, Chris Olave has a very high ceiling. Should Andy Dalton actually, grow himself a pair and throw the ball downfield? We'll leave it at that. I've been begging for Jameis Winston for weeks here. It just has never come to fruition. And it's not like Andy Dalton's winning games either. So worth a shot. At least my fantasy brain tells me I want to see some deep balls thrown Chris Olave's direction. Now, into another rookie receiver here. You're going to see 3 of them total. This is our second in today's episode. Garrett Wilson against Detroit, which got absolutely carved up and has been getting carved up. If you think back to Isaiah McKenzie carving him up, a far inferiorly talented player on Thanksgiving. You just had Justin Jefferson this past week score a franchise record 200 plus yards against this Lions team. Garrett Wilson is also an incredibly talented wide receiver, and his clear alpha in his wide receiver room, the offensive room for the New York Football Jets. As long as Mike White is able to start at quarterback for this group here in week 15, I'm all in on Garrett Wilson. This is another potential week-winning lineup play here. He could go, you just saw him 2 weeks ago, go for 162 yards. We're talking a legit 140 to 150 yard ceiling this week, 1 to 2 touchdowns. The passing game is the way right now to attack this Lions football team. They've gotten a lot better against the run. I expect the Jets with Zonovan Knight and Michael Carter and that whole hodgepodge of running backs that they've got in the backfield, they're going to struggle to move the ball against this beefed up Lions front. They're going to have to pass the ball here. I expect potential flex numbers from Elijah Moore. I expect very, very strong wide receiver 2 numbers here from Garrett Wilson. Again, this is staked upon Mike White's health, who was in the hospital but then later released. He's considered day-to-day at this point with his rib injuries. And 2 of the last 3 games, though, Wilson's went 20 or more points. He had 10 points this past week on 6 grabs for 78 yards. Week 14 at Buffalo, he has had 30 targets, averaging 10 per game over his last 3-game stretch. He is a hot receiver to watch right now. Next up, Michael Pittman at Minnesota. I'm expecting a very reliable and dependable flex level game from him. If there's any way to attack this Vikings secondary, it is their perimeter defenders on the outside playing cornerback for this team. They are not very good. I expect the potential. You could either have Michael Pittman or Alec Pierce or a combination of both. Heck, Paris Campbell out of the slot could make some noise this week. The way to attack Minnesota again is to pass the football. This team, obviously coming off of a loss against Detroit here, might rebound a little bit, but I expect off of a bye week, this Colts team to come out with some flair. Hopefully they're a little bit more buttoned up. They have obviously been somewhat of a disaster throughout multiple facets of this season, and Jeff Saturday, since his opening game win against Denver, has that wasn't against Denver. Who did he beat the first week of the season? I don't know. Doesn't matter. But regardless, they have regressed the last 2 weeks against Philadelphia, and then we saw them against the Dallas Cowboys absolutely get their teeth kicked in. So hopefully here, this Colts team comes out. It was the Raiders. It was Josh McDaniels and the Raiders that this team ended up having their opening game win with Saturday victorious for. So for Michael Pittman again here, I'm not expecting crazy wild ceiling numbers. I am hoping for an elevated floor in this matchup. He's likely been a guy staying on your bench because of the fact that his ceiling has been kind of depreciating here throughout the season, but I do have optimism for him here in this Week 15 matchup. And then finally, good old Christian Watson. We've been talking about him for some time now as a league-winning fantasy asset. He's got the Rams this week. This is a very volatile player to start in your lineup. This has not been a high-volume target magnet, so the floor is potentially a little bit scary. This is a matchup where the Rams this past week held the Raiders to 16 points offensively. Now, a lot of that was Raiders' self-inflicted errors, turnovers in the red zone, and bad play as a whole. But this Packers team coming off of a bye week here, hopefully they've started to find a little bit of themselves and can come out strong swinging in this Monday Night Football game. So additionally, on top of the fact that you're coming off of a bye, it's a 1 day extra rest period as well. So a lot of stuff to like here about Watson, who obviously is a massive, insanely fast, big play threat for this offense. This is a guy that if you look at the cornerback room for the LA Rams, outside of Jalen Ramsey, who has been getting absolutely cooked as of late, they are a very small DB room between Darian Kendrick, Troy Hill. Those guys are sub 6 feet. Christian Watson is a legit 6'4", arguably 6'5", who can fly and basically has a massive wingspan as well. So he can go out here, make some humongous plays, stress the defense deep downfield. Additionally, Romeo Doubs might be back for this team, which at face value seems like kind of a negative, but it also adds another area the defense has to give attention to. I don't expect him to come back here and play, 85 to 90% of the snaps. I'd be surprised if they just fully unlocked him his first game back here. It's not a guarantee he plays yet, but it sounds like he was trending that direction pre-bye week, so I'd be surprised if he didn't play post-bye now. Anyways, what I'm getting at here is that this Packers offense is getting close to full strength. Their functionality should be at a pretty high level here in regards to how high of a level they can play to. And the last thing is that the Rams have been solid against the run. If Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon aren't finding success, this team's going to have to pass the ball more than they want to, which of course benefits Christian Watson all the more. So there you guys have it. We're starting Brandon Aiyuk on Thursday night this week, Chris Olave against Atlanta, Garrett Wilson at home against Detroit, Michael Pittman on the road at Minnesota, and Christian Watson at home at Green Bay, Lambeau Field here for the LA Rams. So as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel here so you never miss a new piece of content. We've also got our running backs episode for today, as we touched on earlier. So go check that out if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you there. Peace out.